All right. So thank you to everybody that participated in our Twitter chat, our Ezzy chat on Twitter about the development on the continent and the responsibility of diaspora. We have with us two special guests that will announce themselves, and also there might be people that will be joining us either via Twitter or via video to have this conversation. So first off, we'll just allow for Alpha to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Alpha, and I am from Sierra Leone, but I currently live in Reading in England. I am a student until next week. I'm currently doing a master's degree in sustainable livelihoods and rural development. I'm very happy to be here, and hopefully we can discuss about diaspora, because I'm a diasporan resident, and I believe it's quite an interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to voicing my own opinions as well as listening to others as well.
Okay, thank you, Alpha. Hadiza?
Hi, everybody. I'm Hadiza Saadu. I am a second generation Ghanaian American born and raised in Iowa. And then I moved to Atlanta. So I live in Atlanta right now. But basically, I'm an artist and musician. Um, my day job is as a business development representative for the master portrait artist Rawson. And if you're not familiar with him, just Google the USPS Maya Angelou stamp. You guys may have heard of it. Um, they misattributed a quote to her, but don't worry about that. Rawson is the one that painted her image, and he's amazing. So I represent him, and I do their social media and SEO work. Um, and aside from that, I'm just trying to push my passions into the forefront so that I can make money from them. And also, being a second generation Ghanaian American, I am very much passionate about the continent, Ghana specifically, and of course the rest of the continent, and how as a diasporan I can contribute my skills and vice versa.
All right, thank you, Hadiza. And lastly, my name is Beulah Sweke. I currently live in Philadelphia, in the United States of America. I was born and raised in America, and I am Nigerian. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think it's a conversation that a lot of us have over the dinner table or in privacy with each other. And I think it'd be great if we can kind of explore what each other believes is the extent of the diaspora responsibility. So yeah, I think this is going to be interesting. So I just want to allow Hadiza to kind of go into detail about her interest in this particular topic because she's actually the person that proposed the topic to us for this month's chat. So go ahead, Hadiza.
Okay, so I guess I should start off by kind of giving a little bit more background. Back in last September, so it was almost a year ago, I spent 2 weeks in Ghana with about 4 other people for a diaspora mission, and that was called Africa Gives through the charity organization Afford UK. And so we established relationships with different organizations ranging from government institutions to private businesses to social enterprises to understand what their functions were and to understand where gaps in development were occurring. And at that time, Ebola was a huge concern. My dad was even saying, I don't think you should go because, you might catch Ebola. But Ghana didn't really get affected by it. But there was a lot of talk about preventative measures and things like that. So it's kind of a lot of fear in the air. And in meeting these different organizations, especially our meeting with the African Women's Development Fund, one of their hugest concerns was the fact that they didn't have an emergency fund to handle the Ebola crisis. And you can imagine, as women tend to make up a lot of nurses and people that care for Ebola patients, that was a huge concern for them. So moving forward from that, coming back to America, I was kind of keeping my eyes open for any discussion about Ebola to see what we can do moving forward to really help the bottom lines of these different organizations that had different objectives. So in February of this year, my alma mater, Emory University, was hosting a series of Ebola discussions. And the February discussion, the topic's title, and I put this in the chat, it was called Ebola, a Neoliberal Disease. And I started talking about this on Twitter, but the discussion was broken up into three different parts. The first part was kind of informing everyone that was an audience member about what factors led to the epidemic status of the disease. So I cited that in Liberia, especially, Chinese miners would come in mining for rubber, and as they kept developing and building roads and construction, it would push locals further and further back into the forests. So in doing that, locals would get in contact with bats that they normally wouldn't have gotten in contact with that had Ebola. And so after people would contract the disease, based on traditional funeral rites, the disease spread further. And as foreigners tried to contain the disease, there's a lot of distrust based off of this whole perception of the expert, the foreign expert. But what are you really an expert on if you can't necessarily communicate with the locals in their language, or not even their language, but their customs? So that was very eye-opening. Then the second part of that panel, a Liberian man who I really cannot remember his name right now, but he was basically talking about what he's been doing with his organization to kind of reverse the trend of distrust between locals and foreign experts. So he's basically been a middleman between those two sides. So after him was I guess the most interesting part of that discussion, where it was a business school professor at Emory's Ezibota B School who was kind of giving more of an economic business background to what had been happening. So he used Liberia as the main example because Liberia was one of the most heavily struck. And basically, before Ebola hit, Liberia's GDP was rapidly expanding. But looking more closely into that, Liberia's GDP was expanding, but it was expanding only through exports. So that's exports of raw materials, or raw minerals. So that's rubber. I can't remember the rest, but mostly rubber. So once Ebola hit, no foreign interest really wanted to do business with Liberia. So after 15 years of GDP expansion, Liberia, in a few short months, shrunk Liberia's GDP to a negative number. So everything that had been happening in terms of development and forward progress was erased, and basically it was like 5 steps forward, 20 steps backwards. So what really struck me about his portion of that discussion was he definitely was kind of biased, because he was talking mostly about how all these foreign interests coming in, it's not a bad thing, yeah, we can look at the Chinese coming in and building roads. Yeah, that is pushing locals back into the forest more, but now they have roads. And it got me thinking, well, yeah, of course, that's a marker of development to you, but is that really a marker of development to the locals? How many people are using those roads, and who is using them? Is it the Chinese that are working there, or is it the locals? And if so, what's the breakdown between the two? So I was thinking about that while he was talking, and then he got to talking about something else that I have been very interested in, and very much so trying to forge my way through that in terms of social enterprise. And I was further disappointed with what he said, but I guess I expected it. So circling back to my experience with Africa Gives and how we met with different social enterprises that were based in Ghana, Ghanaian run, Ghanaian employees, etc. Ghanaians helping Ghanaians. He was using social enterprise from the standpoint of the foreigner. So he was highlighting a certain social enterprise in Liberia that was starting to gain traction, where it was couple of Americans that came in and decided to start a surf resort. And since surfing isn't really a thing in Liberia, they were kind of bringing that to the forefront of the locals and employing locals, teaching them how to run a resort, how to surf, etc. And I was like, well, you know, that is good. It's not a bad thing to employ locals, but why are we focusing on the foreigners? There are people that are in these countries that are doing things, social enterprise for the people. Why do we have to focus on the foreigner when we're already doing it? So I
Hadiza,
asked, yes,
Hadiza, really quickly, I have a question because you've mentioned like foreigners a lot, and you've also mentioned Americans a lot. And so the question that we were having on the Twitter chat was about the diasporan's responsibility on the continent. And so it
yes,
kind of makes me question because I've talked to a lot of my cousins. I kind of know how the attitude is towards diasporans. It's like, yes, you share this heritage, you share this culture, but you don't share our realities. So I
yeah,
think that's a really interesting point that you bring because there's a lot of people that might call me an American or you an American or Alpha European. I don't know exactly where you're from again. I'm sorry, but like it kind of poses a question to me, what is the responsibility of diasporans on the continent? Because it's like, yes, you might connect in this regard, but once again, you don't share our reality. So a diasporan might come and think that roads are a great thing, or they might think that resorts are a great thing when people are like, no, what are you talking about? So I just kind of wanted to see what Alpha's opinion was on that.
sure,
Um, I was intrigued by what she was saying, especially because it relates a lot to the context of Sierra Leone as well. So obviously, some of you may be aware the Ebola virus affected Sierra Leone as well, probably a lot more than Liberia. So all of the factors Hadiza mentioned are also present in Sierra Leone. So, and we do get loads of foreign investors who come in and put in specific things in motion. Like, for instance, I did like the surfing one because we also have a few Western people coming in to start surfing resorts and stuff like that, and that was intriguing. But so it does bring to the question really, in whose interest is development for? Is it for the locals? Is it the people who are there already, or is it being done for like a tourist attraction to attract new tourists? Personally, I think the tourist thing is fine because you need tourism in order for the economy to grow. I'm not an economist, but I think is necessary. But then saying that, someone in a village, say in Sierra Leone, may not necessarily think like that. So they will be thinking, why is their money being spent on building a beach resort rather than say, I don't know, malaria and being affected in a village in a rural area. So I guess the perception is, again, onto the diaspora, what I may think may not be what some village lady or man may also think. So it does. It depends on the individual, really. I personally think foreign companies are very much needed, although I do have issues with the China-Africa relationship. I think it's far too. Our leaders are not very. It's far too lenient. The Chinese can pretty much get away with anything. So basically, when they sign deals, it is just for their best interest. It's not for the country's best interest. Recently in Sierra Leone, there was some land deals with China, and it was 100-year lease for large spaces of land just for them to grow rice. The rice is then exported to China, and then it's then imported back to Sierra Leone and sold to the Sierra Leoneans. So those kind of things I really do not like about the relationship that exists between China and Africa. But I think it's interesting in relation to like the relationship between the locals and the diasporas. That I don't think there isn't a winning percentage. What I may think is definitely going to be different from what someone who's rural thinks. So for that one, I think it's going to be hard to get a little middle point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think so. Let's say, given the situation that people agreed that they agreed on one particular thing that needed to be addressed. So, say, let's all agree that healthcare is a really big issue. We're all looking to hone in on healthcare, and these foreigners are coming to whatever area looking to help correct the healthcare situation. Another question that was posed with the Ezi chat on Twitter was, how can Africans that are off the continent come to a local area and not give across the whole savior complex? And to anybody that's watching live or anybody that's in the chat, if you don't know what the savior complex is, it's kind of like Angelina Jolie. Like, let me come and save all of Africa. Let me come and take these flies away from your eyes and give you a bowl of rice.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're also, as diasporans, just because we have brown skin doesn't mean we're not capable of having that same kind of attitude.
Yeah.
So, Adiza, I'll go ahead and pose that question to you, and Alpha, you can respond as well. So, how can Africans off the continent not come in with this whole dominating savior complex?
That's a wonderful question, and that was definitely a thing that we had to deal with as diasporans for that mission trip. And so, really, the best way to do it is to listen and to not assume that because we have a Western experience that what we think of success and development is what they need. So it's really just about building empathy and trust. So I would say, if we're talking about healthcare, the best way to go about it would just be, try to forge relationships with local organizations that are working to handle or tackle that type of issue. Doing research and figuring out, okay, what's already being done right now, instead of assuming that nothing's being done. And so from there, as a diaspora, go in and just ask questions, and kind of relinquish the attitude of I know everything, and just kind of be humble, and speak human to human. And I think that applies for a lot of things, but especially in this. What we noticed in Ghana was there's a lot of fatigue amongst locals when it comes to foreigners, diaspora included, because it seems like a lot of times diaspora and foreigners come in, like you said, because they have their own interests in mind. They might be noble interests, but it's not as noble if you don't try to engage, or not even try, you don't work to engage and make it a collaboration instead of a, what's the word I'm looking for aside from collaboration? It needs to be a collaborative relationship as opposed to a savior saving someone else, because these people, they can take care of themselves, basically.
Right.
I agree with most of what Hadiza said. It does need to be better communicated. I think that's where it's key. I know you're a communications expert, so you'd probably agree with this, but communication definitely needs to be from like a bottom-up approach, and it's quite cliche. But yeah, so when the diasporans will go to, say, Africa, they will definitely need to communicate on a personal level with those who they want to enact change with, and the change needs to come from the collaboration. As Adiza was saying, it needs to be both parties agreeing on something that will better the people who have to live there 24/7. It cannot just be from someone who's westernized because they've had that experience or exposure to just go in and implement something that probably will not be sustainable. So it needs to be definitely supported by those already on the ground. A good example for this, because my dissertation is on social protection measures and the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone and how that's affected street children. So in my research, what I've found is that there are some diaspora owned organizations who've been supporting local organizations in order to implement strategies in dealing with street children and in dealing with Ebola orphans. So I think that was quite a good way. They're not imposing their ideas, they're merely supporting existing ideas in order to ensure the safety of like street children. I thought that was very interesting.
So basically, the sentiment I get from the two of you is that regardless of who you are, diaspora and foreigner, whatever, you shouldn't go in with the domineering attitude that you know everything and that these people are dumb and that they can't help themselves, and that also should be a collaborative effort. And Alpha, something that you said that I think is whatever initiative is implemented, whatever project, whatever, it needs to be sustainable. I think a lot of times people come in with these grandiose ideas and they work a few months, maybe even a year, and then after that, honestly, it feels as if people in the community are worse off than they were before, either
Mm.
because they learn to become dependent upon whatever resources are available. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I just thought that was something that was really important. Oh, I thought you were gonna say something. Okay. So yeah, we're actually this chat. The sort of chat kind of bled into the time that we have here. But I think another question that's really important to ask, and I just wanted to get like brief responses from the two of you. Um,
Okay.
if you had any suggestions, like if someone is in Iowa right now, a Ghanaian's in Iowa, or if a Sierra Leone is in wherever you're Alpha, I keep forgetting, I'm so sorry. And they wanted to help, but they didn't know how to do so. So you've already given them advice saying, don't be cocky, be collaborative, XYZ, already find out what they're doing. But
Mhm.
in what other ways do you think that diasporans could help support continental development? Do you think that it's majority monetary? Do you think that it's prayer? What do you think? What are some of your suggestions? So
Um,
go ahead and start with Alpha.
okay. Prayer, certainly, if you're a believer, prayer could work. So you can go into that. Other ways, I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily have to have money. I know many people believe. I mean, many people believe you have to pour money into something in order for it to be developed. But say if you're a young person out there and you don't have the monetary, you don't have money in your account, or you cannot support financially, then what you can do is just support whatever way you can on Facebook, on Twitter, social media. Just support, the African development, even if it's country, even if you're not African and you're watching this video and you still want to support initiatives that others are doing, you can. You don't have to have the money. So it's not all about the money at the end of the day. You can support in a variety of ways. Going to shows, if you have the money, donating could work. And so there's multiple ways. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
I would add to that. Of course, money definitely isn't everything. There's actually um, the founder of Africa Gives, Emma Orefua. She did her dissertation, I think, on a subject like this, and she found that um, financial remittances mostly tend to go to consumption. So basically, when our parents send money back home, it tends to go mainly towards consumption, and it kind of just doesn't move from there. And so it's about sustainability. And so we all have skills that we have developed. And if we are passionate about the development of the continent, we can use those skills to contribute in whatever niche that we're in. And so through that, um, again, doing research, figuring out which organizations are doing what. But I think a huge space that should be talked about is the tech space. There's a lot going on tech tech wise on the continent, especially in Ghana. I'm speaking from Ghana's perspective. So if you're a coder or a web developer or whatever, there's actually one thing that you can look up called M Fridays, I think. Hold on. I'm gonna have to like write these things down so that I can like submit it to the thing after this. But there's an organization called M Fridays in Ghana that's hosted through Kwame Nkrumah University, and so they have hackathons, and so you can see what they're doing and see how you can contribute your skill to that, and that's just one example. So I guess what I'm trying to say is instead of focusing on money mostly, focus on skills, and
Hmm.
through
Hmm.
that,
Yeah.
I guess take that another level up, and that could be a system of barter for the future to kind of open a channel of revenue between both sides. And I guess this is the last thing I want to say. As diasporans, as black people across the world who have ties to the continent, whether we're second generation or further, there's a lot of things that are afflicting black people in general. And we can find a common theme through that. And I think one of the biggest obstacles to our own empowerment as Black people and Africans is economic autonomy. So if we can build an international network where we can use our skills to both contribute and receive, then we can establish a platform where we don't have to rely on the majority powers in our respective countries to basically empower ourselves. And then that would just, if we're also working with the continent, that's another form of empowerment for the continent. So that's kind of how I see it.
All right. And then,
Can I add something?
yeah, go ahead.
I think Hadiza, you said something good there, which I really liked. You said for people to lend their skills and to contribute and also to receive. My issue with that is that most people feel like in countries like ours, especially in the West African belts, that's where I'm familiar with, they'll feel if they say you, for example, you're an IT expert in England and you go to Sierra Leone, for example, and you obviously help the youth or anyone to develop their skills, but then what do you get out of it? How much are you receiving it personally? So then that's where the problem lies. Someone who's, say, earning quite a decent salary in England is not going to be willing to just drop everything and like go and support someone in Africa, because then it's quite hard. It's tough times out there. So economically, it might not make sense to them to do that. So how? My question, basically, if you guys could also provide your opinions, how then should what sort of enticement should there be for highly skilled people in the diaspora to utilize their skills in Africa? What can be done so it benefits both ways?
Just really quickly, because we do have to wrap up. Hadiza, you can respond, but we can actually continue this conversation on the website at ezibota.com/discuss, because you're both members. So Hadiza, I'll let you, because I saw you smirk and I know you really want to say something. I'll give my little response. We'll wrap up and then we can continue it on the site. But go ahead. Good question, Alpha.
I think it definitely has to start with the person. The person has to want to do it first, because you can't necessarily just say, oh, you're part of the diaspora, you should help. That's not ever going to entice anyone to help. So it's got to start from the heart. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people that are self-identifying as African diaspora, they want to help. So that's where it has to start. But in terms of what they receive, the way that I've seen it is it's kind of like it's gonna have to start off as kind of a mentoring type thing. It has to be that the person giving their time is willing to see the other person on the end grow, and from that they can see, okay, in the future, if I can help this person develop their skills by sharing my skills, that can be beneficial in the future. But I guess in more of a short-term version of that answer, yeah, I don't think it would hurt to have some sort of like compensation or some sort of something received. I don't have the direct answer to that, but if I'm going to speak abstractly, if there was some sort of platform where self-identifying members of the diaspora could contribute their skill, and then that platform then compensated their time, I think that would be a step in the right direction. So that's just a brainstorming thing for anyone that's thinking about that right now. But I don't know if I have the greatest answer to that question for you.
Okay. To be honest, I think I don't have the greatest answer, but I have a response. It's kind of the same way in which somebody would prefer to work for a nonprofit job as opposed to corporate. There's compensation, but it's not financial. It's not even tangible. It's knowing that you're making a difference, knowing that you might be literally saving somebody's life as opposed to putting more money into someone's pocket. Actually, I can't remember her name, but I actually attended a conference in which somebody addressed that. And she took offense to the question. She was like, why should we have to entice you to come back home? It's almost like your mother having to beg you or bribe you to come back and eat a Christmas dinner with her. It's like, why? You know what I mean? She was really upset about it. I get what you're saying, Alpha. But that would be my response, that you're getting paid in a feeling of worth and a feeling of returning back home and, taking your resources, taking your skills and lending them back to your people. So that's my response. We can continue it on this side because I see a response coming from you. But really quickly, I just wanted to share a response that Lambert on Twitter had in response to our question about the savior complex. He said a good way for diasporans to avoid the savior complex is really to empower and enable locals to take the lead on projects, both in terms of developing ideas and implementing them. Also facilitating the process and not letting people be afraid to be the face. So basically selflessness is what he's saying. So that's that. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a shout out to people that are watching us live. Marilyn, Vincent, Lambert, Amanda, Dina. We asked people to let us know, and they let us know. And then lastly, to the last question I asked about how you can support. I love both y'all's answers. But I also think kind of what Hadiza was saying, if we utilize our platforms, these online platforms, social media, we had a publication, I think 2 days ago, in which one of our members, Mariam Awet, she's Ethiopian, and she talked about the realities of the political situation and the economic situation in Ethiopia. Her sharing that in and of itself, to me, is a contribution. It might not hold as much weight as other people might see it, but I think that was a huge contribution just to kind of shed light and allowing for people to. And also, one of our contributors, Lambert, who I know is watching live, he wrote an article called "Ravings of a Mad Broke Returnee," in which he kind of talked about his honest process in going back home and like not having a job. Sorry to put yourself out there, Lambert, but you already did that with writing it. But not having a job, being broke, being like, what is going on? What is this? I had it made in England. So I think that's also a contribution, but I'm a little bit biased. So just wanted to allow you guys to give closing words, maybe like 30 to 45 seconds. So in African talk, it's like a minute. Let's like a minute. Just give your closing words, anything you want to share. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start with Lambert. I'm at.
You mean that also?
I was like, Lambert, talk. Oh, my bad. Go ahead and start with Alpha.
Lambert. Moving on with, actually, to add on to Lambert, that's my biggest concern as well, actually. Moving, say, to Sierra Leone and not having a job or having something stable and just being a burden, essentially. That's a big fear of mine because I'm currently thinking of moving back to Sierra Leone. But in terms of closing words, I think the diaspora should definitely work together with people already on the ground, people who are living their life 24/7 in their respective countries. I think in order for development to be sustainable, it needs to be collaborative. It needs to work in tandem together with the diaspora and the locals if it is to be a success. So people just need to be self-aware of everything that they do when they get there. They shouldn't put themselves in a hero type arena. They're not better than the people who they're going to help. So it needs to be well thought out before anything can happen. It doesn't matter where an individual thinks they've gotten their degree, because that's another thing that I think is really valued, especially studying with so many international students. They believe just because they acquire a westernized degree, it makes them a whole lot better than people without. Oh, that's a whole different topic. But yeah, so people just need to be self-aware. That's my closing words.
Thank you, Alpha.
I'm just going to piggyback off that. I think self-awareness is the biggest thing that you can have, the biggest asset, and just to continue to grow your self-awareness. It'll just build your own empathy, and to grow your empathy it will just then everything else will make sense, because once you do that, you'll realize, oh, I mean, I haven't lived here my whole life. They have, so they should take the lead. And if they need me for something, then we can collaborate. So, and I think that was Lambert that was saying that about how locals need to take the lead. to empower themselves if there's going to be work done between the diaspora and the continent, and I definitely agree with that. Um, but I guess what I would add to that is, depending on the skill set and depending on the projects, I think that role of lead would have to just be fluid as time moves forward. Of course, starting out, the locals will have to take the lead to identify what it is they need to have done, what needs to be worked on, what needs to be focused on. And then based off of the skills, then again, that's where the collaboration comes in. So that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, my closing words are, I think a lot of people, when they look at all the issues that people in their respective countries are facing, they feel very helpless and hopeless because the issues seem so grand. So this is something that is very small but very powerful as well. Don't feel as if there's nothing that you can do, because there's always something you can do. No matter what your bank account looks like, no matter what your skill set looks like, there's always something. So I just really encourage people to utilize Google. It's there. Like, Google things that you can do. There's always people that need volunteers, people that need your craftsmanship, whatever you do. And don't just in your mouth or with your mind. Like, be active in your actions.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my closing word. And then lastly, Lambert at Motivate Think on Twitter. He said his closing words are to mention his name and Twitter handle one more time. So go follow Lambert at Motivate Think on Twitter.
I hope you follow.
These wants to know if you follow back, Lambert. Don't be fake. Don't be one of those people. So yeah, so this has been our August community chat. Thanks to everybody that helped out with participated in the Ezi chat earlier in this community chat. And thanks to Alpha and Hadiza for joining us for the live portion of our chat. Remember that if you want to become a member, it is free. You can just go to ezibota.com/join. And Hadiza and Alpha, I look forward to you guys continuing that conversation. When I could tell it was about to get a little, not heated, but it was about to get interesting. Continue the conversation on ezibota.com/discuss.
Sure.
All right? And bye to everybody that's watching live.
Thank you.